Welcome to my presentation, Considerations for Moving a Database to a Public Cloud. My name is Chris Presley, and I'm a Solutions Architect at the Pythian Group. You can find us at www.pythian.com or catch me on Twitter at DBAChris. So why this presentation? In certain cases, you can right-click on a database in SQL Server, depending on the version, and deploy it to the cloud in basically a couple of clicks. Well, not so fast. Data is a very valuable and important commodity in our businesses these days, and in doing so incorrectly, we may face some significant brand implications or even legal problems. So, what I like to do at the beginning of a cloud migration project, or really any project, is um, figure out what the goals of the project are. What are we really trying to achieve here? Are we trying to reduce our costs? Um, Maybe we want to implement this fancy DevOps thing that we've all heard about, possibly move to micro releases, releasing many times per week or even per day. Perhaps we have a new office opening up on the other side of the world, and it makes sense to have the data closer to them, and we want to take advantage of some cloud enablement to do that. Perhaps there are specific features we want to take advantage of. Maybe in our business, we have very popular times where we need a lot of horsepower or compute power, like Black Friday, and then other times where it's fairly stagnant. Or perhaps we want to um, leverage platform as a service, or even perform a platform migration. Perhaps we're upset with a particular vendor and we want to move to another vendor, and it makes sense to use the cloud as an intermediate step or even our final step. And so I like to take the goals and document them and circulate them among the project team, including the stakeholders, so that everybody knows what we're working towards and what we're trying to achieve. So that if we start to lose focus, we can pull the goals back out and talk about them and make sure that we're still heading in the right direction. Another important question to ask is, what are the regulatory considerations? Anytime we're going to move data between geographic areas, like even or into the public cloud, we need to take a look at that and make sure that we're complying with whatever it is we need to comply with in our industry. So, for example, do we need to comply with FedRAMP? Is a HIPAA something we need to worry about, or PCI? And what kinds of things will we need to do to architect our solution so that we are in compliance? Um, Perhaps data sovereignty, there are data sovereignty requirements. Maybe some data can't leave the physical confines of our country or a specific country, and that is an impact to our project. Um, Also, if also is who is accessing the data and where are they from, and are there any requirements for them? For example, do they need to be an American citizen on American soil? Do they just need to be an American citizen and it doesn't matter where they are, or did they need to be a citizen of another country? All of these things can impact our solution. Retention is something that fits into regulatory, but it also could have fit into our goals. Um, Perhaps we need to retain data for a very long period of time, and in which case the cloud, that may be our goal with moving to the cloud, access to very cheap storage, long-term storage. So retention will definitely impact our project. Um, I'm a DBA by nature and always have been, so performance is often top of mind. So are my performance needs achievable in the cloud? Um, I've seen customers who have many hundreds of transactions per second kind of thing, and at the time that we looked at their performance, we weren't able to achieve what they need to realistically in the cloud, so they remain on bare metal. Um, Maybe you're having performance problems today, and moving to the cloud is part of your performance problem alleviation strategy, meaning, perhaps if we move the data closer to our users or our customers, perhaps that will reduce latency issues and therefore reduce perceived performance problems. Um, Am I okay with a shared infrastructure? In the cloud, depending on the choices that you're making, you may be sharing your disks with other customers, and you have no idea who they are, what they're doing, and that sort of thing. And are my needs realistic? Is this really a good candidate from a performance perspective to be in the cloud? And then, of course, if our number one, pulling back our goal list, if our goal was to reduce costs, how will our decisions and our performance requirements impact our costs? Will we actually save anything? Another important question is, how am I going to connect to the database? Um, Most likely, if you have a database, if you're moving a database into the cloud, you're now also moving app servers into the cloud. It's unlikely that you would have app servers remaining locally and databases moving into the cloud, though you potentially could. What are the networking implications of any of this? Do I need to utilize a direct connection type technology, which are offered by the different vendors? And What does that mean? What is that going to cost? Because it can be potentially fairly expensive. And then what security what are the networking implications and what security do I need to worry about? Do I need to open a whole bunch of ports and now I'm putting my security at risk? And what's that going to mean from a latency perspective? Is that going to affect the perceived performance of my users? Cost is its own sheet because really, I suspect that many vendors or many customers, I should say, are thinking about cloud to reduce costs, and that is probably their number one goal. So, as we design our cloud solution and plan our migration, um, you know, how am I, if I am trying to save money, how am I going to save money and when am I going to save money? If I'm laying out $1 million to do this migration project, will I save it in 1 year, a month, 5 years, that sort of thing? And perhaps I'm not actually planning to save it on infrastructure per se, or even licensing, but I'm going to do it through some automation, and I'm hoping to take some people who used to do a lot of the things that we do with on-site or physical servers that are now not needing to be done anymore and allocate them into other jobs, and therefore eliminate some positions, and perhaps I'm saving money that way. Um, what training is my staff going to need when we're in the cloud? What's my investment? Will I be bringing in trainers, paying for some online training or something, or that sort of thing? What are they going to need, and what's that all going to cost me? Um, and then, again, am I really going to save when I've taken a look at everything at the end of my plan? I thought I was going to save lots of money. Am I actually going to save any money? Perhaps you will, perhaps you won't. So it's important to think about that as we move along the project. Greatly impacting and the costs as well is what's my plan for migration? Am I planning to re-architect the application into the cloud, chopping it up into multiple platform as a service offerings or something? Or am I just going to kind of lift and shift it, take what I have today, lift and shift that into the cloud, and then I'll come back and do it later? And if I am doing that, how's that going to work? And then I'm most likely incurring technical debt. And we all see technical debt all the time. We always move things and do things with the best of intentions, but it's always very hard to get buy-in to go back and re-architect things and solve and pay our technical debt. Especially if things are kind of working as in today, and we just keep bandaging things up. So technical debt is always a concern and truly a very expensive thing. Um, can I shift platforms in my migration? Meaning, I'm paying for expensive licenses for a certain database platform. Is there an opportunity to migrate to another database platform that's either cheaper or free? Or are there licensing considerations in my choices that I can make when I'm choosing even if I'm remaining on the same platform, are there licensing choices that I can make that might reduce my costs? Or can I bring my own licenses? Am I buying new ones? That thing. Um, and then, so also, am I trying to do the hybrid thing and why? I believe that most people are already in a hybrid cloud environment, and it's very much just a buzzword that really just means I have some stuff in the cloud and I have some stuff locally. And I think that that's going to be the way things are for quite some time. So, in my mind, I'm careful with the hybrid word because I think pretty much everybody is there, and it really doesn't mean a lot. Um, does my staff actually know how to migrate my data and my databases into the cloud? Do they have the training and the knowledge they need, or will this be the first time that they're doing that? Um, should I think about maybe leveraging a partner to assist me with that and learning from them, or are there options around that? Which public cloud is right for me? Years ago, there was really only one cloud. If you asked anybody, there was really only one cloud. But now there are several major players, and they're all working hard to undercut one another. When one vendor implements a feature, the other two tend to follow. When someone brings on a price cut, the others also cut their prices. So um, which cloud is right for me can affect costs, it can affect features, and it can affect other things. So it's an important to do our due diligence when we select our cloud providers. Um, this is becoming less and less an issue, but will my database and features be supported as a first-class citizen in that cloud? So meaning I hit a bug, my staff is stumped, they call the vendor to get some help, and the vendor going to say yes, and let's start working on that right away? Or is the vendor going to say, yeah, you're going to have to reproduce that on a VM or a physical machine and call us back? So we want to make sure that whatever we're using is going to be supported, especially if it's production critical type data. Are the features that I'm working, or sorry, are the features that I'm using going to work in the cloud? Not just supported, but will they actually work? Because there are database features that just don't work, and so we need to ensure that as part of our due diligence, that whatever it is we're planning to use is going to be ready and there for us. Where's our dev and test going to be? Pre and post migration. Most likely, your dev and test is going to be in the cloud because you're going to migrate. Whatever you migrate will be dev and test for a while you get it all figured out, and then it'll either become production or you'll more likely create production off of it. But it is part of our plan. There's a cost associated with it. We need to understand that. When I get to life in the cloud, what's that all going to be like for me? What is that? What does it all look like? My high availability and disaster recovery plan that I used to have, is that still valid? Or do I need a new one? Maybe I don't have to do certain things that I used to, but maybe I have to take some other steps and have some additional backups and leverage blob storage. Maybe I have to rethink where these things are happening and what these actions are. And of course, I need new run books to implement it, to fail over, and I also need to test it as well to ensure that when I need to depend on it, it's there. And so, if you do that, you can do that pre-migration before cutover, and then you're not necessarily impacting users. But it's an activity that can be expensive that we need to do. Um, there's our staff training thing again. There's migration type knowledge, and there's planning knowledge, but there's also life in the cloud knowledge. So does my staff have the knowledge that they need to support everything in the cloud? Do they know how to monitor my systems? Do they know how to access them, fail them over, provision them, that sort of thing? On the subject of monitoring, how am I monitoring it? Am I going to, perhaps write something or buy something that pulls it all together in a dashboard? Or now am I introducing another monitoring system, and now I've got to train up my NOC staff and that kind of thing. If I've made the choice to incur technical debt by moving to the cloud, when am I going to start to deal with that? Is it going to be an iterative process? Am I going to start that right after this project? That sort of thing. Am I going to be comfortable with potential feature loss? Now, there was a case a little while ago where there was a feature called CLR enabled in Platform as a Service, the SQL Database Platform as a Service on Azure. CLR was available. Microsoft determined that, and it had been available for a little while. Microsoft determined that there was a security issue with CLR, so they took it away. And when they announced when they talked about it publicly, they said, and it's not coming back anytime soon. So if our application depended on that and we needed it um, for whatever it is that we're doing, what would I do with that in that type of scenario? Would I be all of a sudden having to migrate locally? Would that be a big deal? Am I prepared for it? That type of thing can happen when we're moving to the public cloud. Am I okay with the provider's downtime? Many services have their own SLAs. 3 nines seems to be pretty common. It can be higher and it can be lower. Um, and 3 nines is almost 9 hours of downtime per year without any compensation. And so this means that if that system's down, I'm not getting any money. And if you subscribe to Murphy's Law, you're not necessarily planning when this is going to go down. So it's probably going to be at an inconvenient time for you. Secondly, that's their SLA before the financial compensation. There are times where cloud services go down for longer than that, and certainly you may be entitled to compensation. But what does that compensation look like when compared to the possible revenue loss of your application being down? So is that going to match up, or is it pretty far apart? And how is that going to affect my customers and our brand and that thing and if type of thing? And if you Google or Bing, cloud outages, you can read about they become fairly famous pretty quick. Also, there are cases where maybe the vendor is within their SLA, but there are lasting effects as the systems replicate and catch up behind the scenes that are affecting you, but they don't entitle you to any sort of compensation. The documentation can be fairly hard to understand and read, but so make sure that you're understanding and taking the time to understand, read, and understand the effects of whatever they're talking about in that. Because it could be quite a shock when things go sideways. Another one I like to talk about is, am I okay with the pace of innovation? The cloud providers are innovating very, very quickly. Things are changing seemingly almost daily at times. Am I okay with that? It may be that some changes don't necessarily affect my systems, but maybe they affect my ability to be productive, meaning things are moving around and I don't know where to find that widget anymore that I used to use every day or in the case of emergency and that sort of thing. So innovation is incredibly fast. I think it's great, but there is an impact on those of us that need to support these things on a daily basis. So I've talked about some pretty scary scenarios, and certainly they're not exhaustive. There's a lot more to think about depending on who you are and what you do. But you might be wondering, that's great, Chris, but how can I get my feet wet? How can I try this out? Well, that's a good question. Certainly, you would never ever want to just decide to move everything you have into the cloud. Not a good decision if most of your stuff isn't there. However, you can certainly try before you buy and get some experience with it and get your confidence up. You could move some of your development environments into the cloud. And if you do that, then you can also move some of your testing into the cloud and automate it. Make your life easier and or the lives of your QA department easier and have them automate the tests and run through at least some basic testing scenarios. Most large organizations that I've been at have applications that are really low use, or not all, but certainly some. And there are those applications that maybe somebody wrote, and it's for data entry or non-critical type work that's used by a handful of users, and maybe it even sits on a server under someone's desk, kind of thing. That type of application could certainly move to the cloud depending on the information classification, and especially if the business can tolerate downtime. Meaning there are those apps where it's just maybe it's data entry, and if it's down on a Friday afternoon, the staff can all work on something else for a couple hours, or do some other thing while IT gets it back up and running. Those kind of low use, low priority apps may be a great candidate for the cloud, and you may be able to save a lot of money with them. Maybe it's time to integrate the cloud into your high availability or disaster recovery strategy. You could and you could touch it that way. That way, you're not necessarily moving production, but you're still getting production like experience. Um, you could do some proof of concepts as well. Take something as a practice and take some of your spare time and move something into the cloud. Move is not really the right word. Actually, copy is a better word. Copy it into the cloud. Do a proof of concept. Learn about it and play with it. See what the costs are like. See what your staff is like with it, and that sort of thing. But perhaps you're not moving things into cloud every day. Perhaps this would be your first time, or maybe you attempted it and things did not go well, and now you need to be very careful, but you are under pressure to tell your CIO how you're leveraging the cloud and reducing costs and all that kind of thing. So, perhaps dealing with a partner could be part of your strategy. And there are a couple of compelling reasons that you might want to consider dealing with a partner. For example, if a partner often has access to funding that you don't. Um, the companies like Pythian can access free funding to conduct proof of concepts where Microsoft, Google, or Amazon, for example, are willing to contribute either funds and or resources to helping create that proof of concept. I've seen the vendors throw in some top architects to help create solutions. We have worked on lots of proof of concepts. Perhaps you want to do most of the work, but you want the planning and the lifting done by people with experience. Again, good reason to possibly deal with a partner. You can learn from every mistake that I've made in the past, for example. Um, we sometimes have quicker access to support than you do. If you've worked with people, it's just about relationships. So if you've worked with people on over time, you develop those relationships, and perhaps, or rather, your partners have because of their experience. So maybe they have the ability to directly call people, or they have access to higher engineering queues because they're proven experts. So they don't need to go through the same filtering that the general public does, that kind of thing. Um, Using partners may be part of your training plan. I don't know how every partner works, but you might want your staff working alongside other staff to learn from them, and that could be very valuable. And I also, regulatory requirements are an important thing, but a lot of customers have the same questions. Um, so partners have dealt with those questions often many times. So perhaps they can lead the legal or compliance staff to the answers a little bit quicker, possibly recycling answers that they've given before, but also possibly introducing the right contacts at the cloud vendors. The cloud vendors want you on their cloud. They want you to be there. So it's in their best interest. So they're going to offer a lot of opportunities, or sorry, they're going to offer resources and assistance wherever they can to get you using their platform. So this is the point where we would normally ask for questions, but it's recorded. So if you have questions, please do contact either myself directly, or please reach out to Pythian at any time. We'd love to have a conversation with you. We'd love to see how we can contribute to your success. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.